Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you the latest insights, thought leadership, and stories from across the global mining industry. In today's episode, we have Paul Barrett, the CEO of Rome Resources, a company working on the front lines of tin, copper, and zinc exploration at a time when critical minerals have never been more in focus. We're going to unpack what it really takes to operate in the DRC, how Rome has kept momentum through regional uncertainty, and where newly raised capital is being deployed as the company looks forward to 2026 and beyond. Paul will also share his views on value creation from potential partnerships or integration with bigger players to Rome's own path forward, along with insights from his career and the experienced team behind him. We're also going to talk about global M&A heating up in the mining sector and also explore whether consolidation may be part of Rome's future and how shifting demand for tin and other metals could reshape opportunities ahead, and obviously a lot more. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks, Rob. Just making some notes about that extensive list that you put in front of me.
Well, I'll be asking the questions, so I'll keep you in check. So, as we always start these podcasts off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your career, and I suppose how your career developed and evolved to what it is today. So, I hand it over to you if you want to tell us, I suppose, from early days and how you got into the industry to present. So,
Sure.
Hand it over to you now.
Absolutely. Thanks. So I'm a geologist by training, Imperial and Durham. So those two universities, both geology degrees. I went into the oil industry, so I started in the North Sea as a well site and then moved on to exploration. So spent many, many years in various parts of the world, Arctic Canada, Arctic Russia, as I said, North Sea in the US. I got into minerals really, actually it was right at the beginning of the pandemic was the first one. So we looked at a phosphate project in the States, which brought me into the mineral space. And at the same time, I was starting to look at other mineral projects. And one of the shareholders of Pathfinder Minerals asked me to come on as a non-exec, which I did. And at that point in time, they were just disposing of a Mozambique project, which had been basically had been taken away from them a long time ago, and they were trying to get it back. So it basically became a cash shell. And so I was tasked with really trying to find a good target to do a reverse takeover into. So we came up with Rome Resources, which was a TSX listed company. It wasn't getting much traction in Canada at the time, and so we brought that in and we did the RTO. So I then became chief exec of the company. I'd been chief exec of another AIM company that I'd founded some time ago, Europa Oil and Gas, which is still going at the moment. Actually, it's quite an interesting time for a Europa. So I do have that AIM CEO running companies on the market experience. So I took over as CEO of Rome after the RTO, and we've been basically working on this DRC project ever since.
Before we start speaking about Rome Resources, I just wondered, obviously you've come from the oil and gas industry. What are some of the major differences that you see from that industry compared to mining? Because I know there is a lot of major differences, and I just wonder what your thoughts are from the differences between the two industries.
I think from an exploration point of view, the most interesting difference that I've found is having, looked at some deep water, worked on some deep water projects where, a single well is $100 million in the oil sector plus, is that the level of scientific rigor put to drilling holes in the ground for mining is much, much less. And you can see that because, it doesn't take a great amount of money to drill a small hole in the ground on the mining side, and you can always turn around and say, well, that didn't work. We'll go 100 meters down the road. But on oil and gas, it's such an important binary outcome for a $100 million investment that there's a lot more science. And I'm trying to bring some of that science in, especially some of the stratigraphic work, because, well, we'll talk about the project, but basically this is a meta-sedimentary sequence. And so it does work quite well when you look at some of the stratigraphy you can do from the chemistry. So I'm trying to bring a few things that we've used in oil and gas to quite good effect into the mining sector here, and see how it goes.
Yeah, maybe we could do another podcast next year around those differences and obviously the science behind that. So, yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. So just wondering if you just give us a snapshot of Rome Resources, and if you can just obviously start by giving us an overview of the company and obviously talking about the project as well.
Yes, so the company is, we've got a pretty tight board. So when we did the RTO, Rome came with the DRC tin copper project, which we'll talk about. But in terms of the management, so Klaus Heckhoff is the chairman. He was one of the founders of Rome and has worked in the DRC. He's very, very important in terms of the way that we can do business in the DRC and looking at maybe new projects and getting things done. So Klaus is instrumental to the project itself. Very sadly, Mark Gasson, who was COO, sadly died of a short illness last month, and that's been quite a challenging time for his family, but also for everybody who knows him. He was very well known in the industry. So we are at the moment, the rest of our team in terms of on the ground is Jamie Anderson is very, very key to all this. He's Australian geologist he basically lives in DRC. He's got a family in DRC, so he's in country as the site manager effectively. And we've got a good team around that in terms of some of the geologists who are involved in the Alphamin discovery and various other. So it's a very well experienced team in terms of DRC and the tin project. So going forward, we will at some point we will replace Mark with a new COO, but I think Jamie's stepped up quite effectively into that role as we start drilling, because we're now post RTO. We drilled with the cash that we raised, which was basically $4 million plus a strategic investor we may talk about shortly, put in another $4 million. So with that cash, we drilled a program that finished in July of this year. So almost 12 months of drilling. And now we're back to having raised another $2 million on AIM. We are now back to starting drilling. A lot of I'm sure we'll come on to it, but the target for this drilling is essentially the deeper, wider intercepts of the tin that we've seen elsewhere, and we've seen in our near surface drilling to date.
The DRC can obviously be a particularly complex jurisdiction to operate in. I just wonder if you can just walk us through what it's really like working on the ground there, especially over the last year with the backdrop of operating uncertainties in the region, and also I suppose how your team has managed to keep the dual program moving forward.
Yes, so there's a few things there. The problems that were in Goma, and Goma Airport is still closed. It's still not been resolved. So this time last year when we went out there, we would go via Kigali and into Goma and then get a helicopter over. Unfortunately, now we're now based in Kisangani, which is twice the distance away. So we do use a lot more fuel than we like, but it is an absolutely doable way of operating. So Kisangani is now our helicopter base. We have people there who help with all the paperwork, and as you can imagine, in a country like DRC, there's a lot of paperwork, especially if you're bringing in South African helicopter and you're bringing in expats to work, etc. You're bringing in the Starlink, everything requires paperwork. And so it's very important to have people who know how that's working. We have people in Goma, in Kisangani, and also locally, we've got a base basically at Osakari, which is the closest town. And so, with all those people working for us, and of course we've got backup in Kinshasa in terms of the accounting, in terms of liaising with the government, with the mining authorities, etc. So it's quite a lot of people involved, and they've been doing this for a long time. So it's a nice team. We also we haven't really mentioned Alphamin yet, but we're only 8 kilometers from Alphamin. They have an airstrip, so when we had the problem with M23, the rebels coming close, 150 kilometers away, they got. It was a trigger point that both Alphamin and ourselves thought was prudent to at least shut down operations. And so we coordinated quite well with them using their airstrip, and they used our helicopter. And so there's very much a synergy there. And again, now that was only a shutdown for about a month. Had to calm down. Alphamin have been operating and exporting their product ever since. So with the right team in place, who have the contacts, who know what they're doing and have been doing it for a long time, it's a perfectly reasonable jurisdiction to operate in.
You recently raised some funds for the company. Just wondering, you just tell us a little bit more about how you plan to use those funds, and I suppose moving into 2026 and beyond.
Yes, that's right. So we raised 2 million sterling, and our plan is to drill somewhere in the region of 2,000 meters of holes, which are really targeted. So in terms of our projects, we have two. We have Kalai, which is a pure tin project. Actually, it has tin from surface. There is a little bit of kind of the local artisanal working, which we're pretty good relationships with those guys, but that's very small scale. So there's tin at surface, and what we've seen is a really high grade, up to about 12% tin in some intercepts in the shallow part, less than 100 meters. So we're now coming back, stepping out slightly and drilling deeper down into the deeper part of the Kalai tin intercepts, and what we're hoping for is basically a repeat of what happened at Alphamin, where a lot of skinny but very high grade intercepts are found near the surface, and they get wider as you go deeper. So if we can get those super high grades in wider intercepts, it'll be a really, really good result. And so that's Kalai. There's probably 3 holes to be drilled there. In Montagoma, we have a new tin zone which we identified with one of the last holes in the last campaign. So we're chasing that down along strike to the southeast, and also again the same model, going deeper and looking at into Montagoma below the really big copper zone and into the tin. So that's what the money is going to be used for, which is very much a focused, and hopefully that will only take, as I say, we're starting drilling in the next week or so we get through Christmas, etc. We should be finished by the end of March or into April. Then we will update the resource study April, May, and look at what the plan will be from going on from then on.
How do you envisage the path to value creation for Rome shareholders? Is there a particular scenario where your project could be folded into a much bigger player like Alphamin, or perhaps another route?
So there is clearly, with Alphamin being next door and exporting, 20,000 tons of tin concentrate a year, that there is a clear synergy there, especially with Kalai, which is the pure tin. So extracting Kalai and putting it through Alphamin's facility will not require much in the way of modification. So it's a very high value add for them, and we do have a dialogue with IRH on that particular project. So we're then also with Montagoma, we have a lot of copper. At the moment, we have 45,000 tons of copper in the shallow section. So it's a very high grade very valuable copper project, but Alphamin do not process copper, and so therefore it would add a certain amount of complexity. But there is a different audience that we are talking to there in terms of potentially Chinese companies that could come in and develop both the copper and the tin at Montagoma. So there could be a couple of ways of monetizing that. We're always looking at potentially new projects. So, I mean, it comes back to my oil and gas background of really being brought up with a portfolio approach, so that not every project necessarily will work, but on the other hand, if they do work and you sell them, what are you going to do next? So you always have to have a bit of a conveyor belt of projects. So that's happening in the background as well. So yeah, it's very much front focus of our mind as to what would be the right time to monetize these and get a return for shareholders.
Yeah. The tin market has been fascinating lately, obviously, with lots of attention on the supply chain constraints and the critical minerals narrative. How do you see the role of tin and copper and obviously zinc evolving? And what does that mean for the company like Rome Resources?
So I think the tin market is a fascinating market. It's quite small. I was at the International Tin Association had a day on Friday where most of the public domain tin operators outside of China were present, and the room, there was only 20 or 25 people in the room. So it is a very small community and very small market, and of course that then means that it's quite volatile in terms of price reaction to supply hiccups. For example, Indonesia and Myanmar recently. So I think there's some short-termism in the price increase in terms of, I mean, we're getting to 40,000 or so now. It's very good, but I don't think it's a spike. I think it's really quite sustainable because the continued requirement for tin is quite difficult to recycle percentage-wise. So I think the forward curve for tin in terms of demand is very strong in terms of solar, in terms of chip manufacturing for advanced computing, etc. And so, there's not that much. There's not an obviously large amount of supply coming through, waiting in the wings. So I think it's long term. It's got very, very strong potential. Copper itself, of course, copper is a much larger market, much more easily recyclable. So although that demand will increase, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of massive use of copper last year in China for the grid system, improving the electrical grid. So those kind of things will continue, and I think copper, because as I say, it's a much larger market. It is quite strong, but probably not quite as dramatic as the tin price is going to be going forward. That's my view.
As we mentioned earlier, you're obviously from the oil and gas industry, or you were previously in the oil and gas industry. What lessons would have you learned in your previous roles and been in that industry that could shape your approach to leading Rome Resources moving forward?
Well, there is a lot of. I mean, I've mentioned the portfolio approach, but there is also a lot of. There are more in terms of partnerships in oil and gas than there seem to be in the mining industry, and I quite like. I mean, people do talk about strategic investors, but not really joint ventures, and I think there's a bit to be done there. I think in terms of maybe developing joint ventures, spreading your risk around in various projects. Maybe taking a smaller slice of a larger pie, that kind of thing. Very common in the oil industry, not so common in mining. So that's always in the background as well. It's all part of this trying to minimize the risk and maximize the return.
As you've mentioned and alluded to, obviously your team's well known for its DRC experience, particularly with obviously the leaders like Mark and Klaus. Just why don't you just talk us about the team's pedigree and how that deep in-country experience gives Rome an edge in the DRC?
So yes, the Mark and Klaus they've been in country on and off for 25 years or so. They were responsible for the initial drilling on the Alpha Min discovery, and so they were very instrumental in kind of understanding and bringing that forward. I think that, the business model, as I've mentioned, is to basically explore, bring it to a certain point with a maiden resource or maybe a pre-feasibility study, that kind of level of maturity, and then monetize. And that's what Klaus in particular has done with a gold project, a lithium project, and a copper project, all in the DRC, and Alpha Min as well. So doing that, having that experience, and it kind of really shows that they're very clued in, wired into the sector in DRC in so many different ways. So it's really important, if there's any issues, if there's any questions to be had with the ministry or in Kinshasa or whatever, Klaus is straight onto it. So I think it's very important to have that experience, and and they've made a lot of money doing that. So good on them. And I think we're trying to replicate that again with this particular project.
Yeah. Obviously, there seems a lot of activity in the mining M&A globally. How do you see the M&A landscape shaping up for in particular for the tin sector? And is that something that you see as part of Rome Resources' future?
I'm not sure at the moment. I mean, we're still pretty much focused on adding value. I mean, we have the maiden resource, which is based obviously on the shallow drilling, so it's quite light in terms of the tin volumes. It's good in terms of the grade, certainly Clyde. So we're concentrating really on adding that value, taking that a bit deeper, and seeing where we get to with this next drilling program. So I don't know. The M&A side is probably not. Well, we do look at possibilities of maybe acquiring new projects, but we're not looking at any real merger or divestment ideas at the moment. It's too early, I think.
Yeah. And lastly, what's the short to medium term outlook? And if there's anything else that you would like to add and share with our audience, who are predominantly people within the mining industry.
Well, as I say, the focus is on the drilling. So we're going to, for us, it's going to be 3 to 4 months of pretty good, strong activity. Hopefully, we'll get some good intercepts, and we can roll those into the resource update. Once we get to that point, which is likely to be the end of second quarter, probably next year, we can then decide what to do. And I think we will have had, assuming that we get some decent results, we will have had discussions with the potential strategic or potential partners to divest to. And so there will be quite a few options, I think, at that point in time as to what we do, whether we raise more money to add value and go to the PFS stage, or whether we do a deal with, for example, someone like IRH, in terms of getting the projects developed further. And I'm hoping that we will have identified and be starting to look at getting other projects into the business by then. So I think the landscape will change. With this next 6 months is adding value basically by this drilling campaign, and so I'm quite hopeful that the model stacks up. Geologically, it's quite compelling. So we just need to drill those holes and get those assays, and I think we'll be in a really good place.
Great. Paul, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story, telling us about Rome Resources and obviously the work that you're doing in the DRC. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, and obviously also follow the story, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Well, the best way is the website. We've got the Investor Hub set up on our website, and a Q&A, etc. They can always send emails and what have you, old-fashioned stuff. But that the Q&A on Investor Hub is a good place to reach out, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll include all those details in the show notes accompanying this episode for easy access for any of our listeners to view the story and get obviously updates on Rome Resources. So thank you for your time again, and good luck with the essays and obviously for the year ahead.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, thank you for your continued support. Appreciate if you can share this episode far and wide. Share it across anyone that you know within the industry. Doesn't matter what country, continent that you're in. This is a podcast that is for educational purposes. So appreciate if you can share the episode to like-minded people within the mining industry, because they will learn from these episodes. So thank you again. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.